So we're right in the middle of the summer and it's hot as hell. I actually have to turn off the fan when I make these videos because it makes too much noise in my opinion. I need to get a mic, I really do. Thank you so much for checking out my 100 years of movie series. This is covering from 1918 all the way to 2018. We are on our journey where we are at 1951 to 1961. So there was so many good movies that I actually saw during this month. A lot of them for the first time, and so it was very difficult to pick my favorite movie from each individual year. So I'm going to show you my favorite films from 1951 to 1961, going through each year, talking about each film that I've seen during that year, and talking about my favorite at the end of that. So I hope you enjoy this. Make sure to check out the rest of my 100 Years of Movie series where I've already covered 1918 all the way up to 1950. So I'm already there. So let's just kick off this end of month with, now I guess it's July now, so let's just kick off 1951 with something really special. So 1951, I actually only have seen one movie, and that is Alfred Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train. I really enjoyed this one. In fact, this one had a lot of lightheartedness and darkness combined together. So Strangers on a Train follows, let's see, Farley Granger, Ruth Roman, and Robert Walker. I am not too familiar with any of these actor or actresses, but I hope to someday watch more of their stuff. But I really loved this movie because it kind of starts on just a dark turn, or it's a strange, kind of angry tennis player, just like a normal husband, is angry about potentially a cheating spouse, pretty much just venting, and he's like, I just want to kill her, I want her dead. And this other guy hears it, he's like, well, yeah, I have problems with, with someone else too. Like, how about we just, swap murders, and I'll kill your wife if you kill this one person for me. And obviously the guy's just taking it kind of like, okay, this guy's just kind of just wants him to, go away, but at the same time, it kind of takes a dark turn there, and then it becomes this whole ordeal, and it's really fun to watch. I really loved this movie. It kept me glued to the screen the entire time. So definitely check out Alfred Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train. This one's really fun. I didn't expect to have this much fun with this movie. So Alfred Hitchcock, I mean, he's an amazing guy. So definitely check out Strangers on a Train for 1951. So let's move on to 1952. This time I actually had a couple of honorable mentions, some things that I've already seen, and these movies are, so we have Orson Welles' Othello. I had just seen this movie, and I've only seen one version of this. This Criterion comes with both the 1952 and 1955 version, which is a little like 2 minutes trimmed down or whatever. Man, what a spellbinding, kind of just tight adaptation of Shakespeare's play. Orson Welles does a fantastic job in this one, and I really love the beginning and ending of this movie so much. Alright, so the movie I did not pick was Shane, and this is a movie that kind of got on my radar when I watched the movie Logan last year with Hugh Jackman. Shane was playing on in the background, and I guess there was a lot of subtle, tips of the hat to this movie, and so I was really excited to watch this kind of just cowboy movie, just of a guy kind of just a drifter who just wants to help out. And that's something that I really loved about this movie. It's, it's got a dark ending, but it's also hopeful, unlike Logan. So, yeah, and so there's that. Another contender, two contenders actually, that are really strong. One being Akira Kurosawa's Ikaru, which means to live. I really love this movie. In fact, this is probably what would get number 2 if I didn't pick the other movie. But Ikaru was not a normal Kurosawa film where you're thinking of the samurai. It's just a businessman who's just kind of been meandering his entire life until he realizes he has stomach cancer, and more or less he's trying to find the meaning of life, and he's kind of just been going through it without really paying attention, and I guess just smelling the trees and the forests around him, as you do, kind of just you meander through life, and you don't really notice all the small things that kind of make your life kind of somewhat special. And so he meets this girl who's a lot younger, kind of his daughter's age. He's got an estranged relationship with his own son, and it's just a wonderful thing to see on the screen. So Ikaru wasn't it, but I really loved it as well. And another movie that I didn't pick was Singing in the Rain. I'm not the biggest on musicals. In fact, I just recently saw this movie. I liked it. I liked the Singing in the Rain bit a lot more than I liked any of the other movies, but it was a pretty good movie, pretty solid musical. So let's actually go on to what I've chosen. And in that movie is actually High Noon. And this is actually with Grace Cooper and Gary Cooper and Grace Kelly. So with High Noon, you have Grace Kelly, who's playing sheriff, and what you have is you have one of the criminals that he put up years and years ago come out of town and a hit on his head. The sheriff, Grace Kelly, trying to figure out how many people have his back. He had like 6 or 7 deputies. A lot of them are kind of just like, oh, I just signed this up kind of for community service purposes, and also just kind of just for the job, like the title of being like a deputy, and like that's pretty much all of them. So you see a lot of the cowardice behind a lot of the people in the town not defending their own sheriff in the end, and then him taking things and matters into his own hands. But yeah, like the title suggests, this is all at a showdown at High Noon. And so I really loved how compelling this story is about really just showing the true colors of some people, and really kind of just exploring that aspect of, you know, that like bystander effect kind of in a way, and really understanding that some people are kind of cowardice about certain things, but when the truth comes to find them, that sometimes that, you know, might be necessary for them to step up, right? Who knows what I'm talking about? All right, so let's actually move on to 1953. So a pretty hard year. There was actually only a couple movies that I saw in 1953. The first one that I watched was From Here to Eternity. I really love this movie with Burt Lancaster. This is a really good WW2 movie, so World War II movie. This is like kind of just right before Pearl Harbor, so this is a couple weeks before Pearl Harbor happens. Navy and Air Force base that these men and a few women are having to deal with. They're just having the times of their life until a lot of things hit the fan, but the things that hit the fan are, you know, personal matters, not the war itself. The war itself happens at the end of the movie, kind of, but it really explores that. So I really loved From Here to Eternity. Another movie, which is actually my favorite movie by Yakashiro Ozu, was Tokyo Story. I really loved this movie, kind of just seeing the family dynamics of just these different generations from different time periods, especially with post-World War II Japan. And that's what Ozu is known for, is really just focusing on the subtle, unimportant, uninvolved matters of everyday existence, and that's something that I need to explore more of his works, but Tokyo Story was really powerful. But the movie that actually beat that was a little French movie called Wages of Fear, and this movie was powerful beyond belief. I was like stuck onto this movie the entire time I saw it. I really loved the opening, and just in this colonial kind of spot in South America, in this oil town more or less that just no one cares about, and everyone's just kind of a despot. There's no one who has any jobs there until they are pretty much offered this really dangerous job to you know, transport oil to this, you know, oil rig, and it's really explosive and really dangerous, and it really it's a crazy film. It's a really crazy film, and really suspenseful, and the dialogue is funny. It's just kind of like, it's like a road trip movie in a way. It's in a strange spot where it's a bunch of just guys just talking about, you know, existing and like a lot of the problems they have in their own lives, and it just really explores it. And it's really lengthy too. It's 147 minutes, so it's almost 3 hours long. It's 2.5 hours about roughly, and so I really loved how compelling this movie was. So Wages of Fear is actually my pick. It's, you know, directed by Henry-Georges Clouzot, so I really loved another film we'll talk about from 1955 in a second, but Wages of Fear was an amazing film, and we're actually going to talk about this in a second, because there's a movie that actually kind of copies it in a weird kind of way. Alright, so let's move on to 1954, which is one of the most difficult years by far out of all of the things that we've talked about. Alright, so let's get some things out of the way. The first two were, we have Elie Kazan's adaptation of John Steinbeck's novel East of Eden. We have the, you know, James Dean in here, who was only in a couple of films before he tragically died in a car accident. This movie is really compelling. I really like that movie. Another film that I really like, and I really love this artwork because it's a really good comic book artist, but Creature from the Black Lagoon. This is actually the last of the Universal horror monster movies, the classics that we have. I really like this movie. I think it's really cool. Del Toro, you can see a lot of his stuff that he really loves with his Doug Jones work. And this, you know, can see that kind of creature prototype right there, just in a kind of Jaws-esque fashion. This is kind of proto, you know, it's pre-Jaws. I mean, that's some of the things that happen in this movie, the cinematic aspects of it, and also the score as well, reminded me a little bit of Jaws, and I like that. So it's not Creature from the Black Lagoon, and it's not probably the pick that a lot of people are thinking, and it's not On the Waterfront, which is one of the best movies I've ever seen in my life with Marlon Brando. This film is really powerful, especially the ending. The ending is just, it's what it's, you know, it culminates to. So definitely check out On the Waterfront if you haven't seen this movie. It's this really great story of this down on the luck, kind of like it's like pre-Rocky in a little bit of a weird way. But I really like this movie. But the pick that beat it all is actually an Akira Kurosawa film, and you probably know this one because it's his most famous film, and that's Seven Samurai. Now this movie, it was my first Criterion I've ever owned, and one of the first samurai movies I've ever watched. I always loved samurai anime. I've always liked Rurouni Kenshin or Cowboy Bebop, or, you know, things that have a slight tinge of samurai things-esque to it, and so I really liked that kind of stuff as I was growing up, but I grew into watching Kurosawa films, and this is the first one I watched. This is a chore to watch because it's 3 hours plus. Yeah, it's 207 minutes, but it really explores the depths of each of these characters and these peasants who pretty much have nothing, are attacked by bandits, are threatened by bandits their entire lives, their families' lives, to hire these samurai who are pretty much mostly just made up of ronin, but you have this leader who takes charge of this group, and you just see the different characters flesh out throughout this film, and kind of it really explores it, and I really love this movie. If you haven't heard of Seven Samurai, I mean, come on. Really, go watch this movie. This is definitely the best movie from 1954, On the Waterfront being very close to it. So let's move on to 1955. All right, it's getting really hot in here because the fan's off. So 1955, we have a few things that I did not pick. Lady and the Tramp, classic Disney film. I love the Steelbook too. I mean, come on, you know this movie. That's something I didn't pick. I didn't pick another Hitchcock movies, To Catch a Thief with Cary Grant and Grace Kelly. This movie was just about spies and thieves and just this jewel thief, and so it's really cool. It's kind of got a crazy ending as well. Another movie I didn't pick was a French movie called Lola Montez, which is this woman who's had a lot of strange affairs in her own life, and is retelling it as she's a circus performance act, who's just like this legendary kind of just sexual icon in this, I guess, fictional world. I don't know if it's fictional or not, but she's just recounting all the things that in her past, and it's really interesting and it's really dynamic. I really love this movie. And it's not another Henry Georges Clouzot movie, Diabolique, which is probably one of the best Hitchcockian films there is, but you know, it's like that man, the craziness of this movie. I'm not going to say much about it, but I mean, look at that cover. So it's just beautiful. So definitely check out Diabolique because this movie is amazing. And yeah, it's French, but who cares? Go read some subtitles. It's good for you. So the movie that I picked over Diabolique is one of the most powerful films I've seen in a long time, and that is Night of the Hunter. Holy shit, Robert Mitchum in this movie is just so psychotic and psychopathic, and is just one of the craziest people, and also the performances from the kids. This movie is about this guy who comes in to this very vulnerable woman who has a couple of kids, but her husband died in jail for doing, you know, something wrong with some money, and he was his cellmate, and pretty much like, oh, I have his dying words, I have his dying will, and then pretty much just sneaks into the lives of these two kids and this mother, and it's just such a crazy film, and it's filmed so well, and it's so minimalist when it comes to, like, it doesn't have very much going on for it with its set, because I watched all the special features with it talking about how it didn't really have much of a budget, but the score was insane. The shadows, the cinematography, just the lighting, everything about this movie was just so dark and scary, and just the performances, especially by Robert Mitchum, were just insane. And I love this movie. I really say watch Night of the Hunter, because this film is one of the most powerful movies that I've ever seen, and it's got some really crazy moments in it that are definitely worth checking out. So Night of the Hunter is my 1955 pick. Alright, so let's move on to 1956 to a few other things that I picked up. Alright, so one thing that I've had for quite some time is a Gregory Peck classic, Moby Dick. I really love this movie. This is a Hollywood Gold Series one. It's like from Australia or something, but it's a Region A kind of thing. It's all regions or whatever. This is a great Moby Dick. I actually think this is the best Moby Dick there is out of all of the adaptations. I like In the Heart of the Sea. That movie Ron Howard directed was actually pretty good, but more realistic to like what the whaling industry was like. So I really like that movie. The first movie that I actually watched to start this entire month off was Forbidden Planet, with none other than Leslie Nielsen, who in a really serious role as kind of just this captain defending off against this invisible creature attacking this planet that they are trying to figure out what happened there. There used to be a habitable planet. It's a really good movie. I really definitely recommend checking out this sci-fi classic. And another movie that I didn't pick was Robert Preston's A Man Escaped. This is just a prison escape movie, and it's literally it's literally exactly that, and doesn't really give you anything else. It's just pretty much him kind of going through the motions, and that's it's just a prototype for a lot of the things that come in the future with it. I really like this movie. But the film that I picked over all these films is actually The Searchers. And The Searchers is a really good John Wayne film and John Ford film that really shows the dynamics of where Westerns would actually go in the future. It really explores race relationships, and it also explores just how terrible we can be to each other. But you see John Wayne as pretty much just being this arrogant prick in this movie. But I really liked the color of this movie. It really pops, and I also really loved how John Ford brought out that dark side of John Wayne, which you never see because John Wayne's usually the good guy. And so I really loved that dynamic, and I really love the social implications behind this movie. So definitely check out The Searchers. Actually, it's a movie I watched when I was in film theory class at the very end of my graduate school. It was really fun. It was one of the weeks that we had to pretty much cover on was The Searchers. So I'm really happy that I watched this film. All right, so my picks from 1957. Let's move on to another hard year that is really difficult. All right, 1957. We have a classic in The Bridge on the River Kwai. These British officers who have this entire platoon, they're captured by this just Japanese internment camp kind of in a way. They're just making them build a bridge here, but they're pretty much sabotaging it themselves. It's really fun. I highly recommend checking that movie out. An Ingmar Bergman classic, Wild Strawberries, I did not pick. However, I really loved just the philosophical musings of this film, because you just have this old man who is just, you know, a retired teacher just trying to go through his career and also his family life and just exploring his childhood a little bit more. I really love that movie. Another movie by Ingmar Bergman that is probably the first thing that popped up in my mind during this year was The Seventh Seal, which I've seen years and years ago, and I've also seen more recently. Definitely the better of the Wild Strawberries, Seventh Seal. Heavily influenced on the religious tones and the philosophical tones of dealing with death, honestly. And that's something I really love. Definitely check out Seventh Seal and Wild Strawberries. And there's also another movie that I watched, Paths of Glory, with Kirk Douglas. I loved this war film, this anti-war film. Just showing the humanities and shocks and trials of just what humans can do to each other. So what beat all those films? Because those movies were just freaking amazing. Well, to me, it's pretty obvious. It's 12 Angry Men. We have Henry Fonda, directed by Sidney Lumet. You have so many different characters and cast members that are just... There's this trial going on. I'm trying to remember the exact crime. Pretty much a Puerto Rican teenager charged with murdering his father. And you see all these men unanimously, except for one, say he's guilty. And then slowly but surely you see, based on the dialogue in this one kind of courtroom, in this, you know, the back room of a courtroom, kind of just where all the jury kind of resides and try to figure this out, how they slowly change their mind. And it's just one of the most compelling things that I've ever seen. I love movies that are all in like one location shot, and the dialogue is what matters, and the characters are fleshed out more and more, and you can see where people's motivations are going towards, what vice versa. All those things are great. I really love 12 Angry Men. I highly recommend checking this movie out. This is my pick for 1957 for sure. Alright, so let's move on to 1958. Another hard year for me to pick things from. The first being Run Silent, Run Deep with Clark Gable and Burt Lancaster. It's a really good submarine movie talking about World War II. I really like this movie quite a bit. Next is another classic film by Akira Kurosawa, Hidden Fortress. I didn't pick Hidden Fortress, although I can see how awesome this movie was. You have I can't can never say it, Toshiro Mifune. But it's a crazy film about these just warring clans, pretty much the prototype to a lot of the Star Wars things. And I can see where a lot of the things that George Lucas did in Tatooine were related to the Hidden Fortress, and I like that a lot. But Hidden Fortress was an amazing Kurosawa film, definitely one of his better films, and I highly recommend checking that out. But the movie that I picked over that was a neo-noir film by Orson Welles, Touch of Evil. Charlton Heston and Janet Leigh are in this movie as well. This movie is dark. Very, very dark. I mean, look at the cover and also just listen to the title. It's a dark kind of tale about this corrupt police chief. I want to say he's not a police chief. He's a police chief. And this Mexican youth framing on this like rape and murder of an individual. And it's just pretty much a detective story because it's a noir movie. And you're seeing all of this, culminate to this big thing, and this finale is just insane. This movie really just kind of surprised me a lot. How well lit it was. The cinematography, obviously, that's what drives film noir. A lot of the times is the shadows, and so I highly recommend checking out Touch of Evil. This is my 1958 pick. Check that movie out. Alright, so let's move on to 1959. This is another hard year, in my opinion, to pick things from. The first one being the epic classic and Ben-Hur. This movie with Charlton Heston is just one of the craziest movies and just one of the most epic movies that you've ever seen. And I'm not talking about that garbage remake that I will not watch, probably. But this movie is just I mean, it's classic, kind of big golden age Hollywood. And that's something that I really liked about this movie. It's very long, has a gotten interlude, all that fun stuff. Next is another pretty cool Hollywood classic, John Wayne and Rio Bravo. I really like this movie with Ricky Nelson and Dean Martin. It's a classic Western. I really liked it a lot as well. Another movie that I really liked, that this probably one of the more recent movies that I watched, was, I finally watched it because it's one of his more well-known films, North by Northwest, which is a fantastic spy thriller that honestly I think predates all the Bond films, kind of just giving the idea of some of the Bond films. Obviously the books came out, in the 50s, more so, but I really loved North by Northwest. I really liked the nature of this film, and how it ends is really crazy too. It's over the top, it's pretty classic Hollywood as well, so Hitchcock's North by Northwest is really good as well. Now these last two are the ones that I actually chose between, and these ones are both films from France that I really loved. The first being 400 Blows. I did not pick 400 Blows. This movie is the first Truffaut movie, pretty much about that director, his childhood. And I really loved this movie, and showing how dark that aspect of his entire life was, and pretty much how he was mistreated by his teacher, his family, his stepdad, and just all these things. And it just culminates into like a sad but really impactful ending. But I highly recommend checking out 400 Blows. But the movie I picked over it was a French film called Hiroshima Mon Amour. This movie is such... it's hard to explain. It's a romantic movie about just this guy and this girl, this Japanese man and this French woman who meet each other and fall in love pretty quickly. Spend a night together with each other, and the first 20 or 30 minutes are... I didn't even know that the film wasn't going in that direction, but it just changes pace so quickly, and it kind of just explores, post-World War II Japan on top of the society that they're living in now. The lives of each of these individuals tangling. He wants to stay with her, she wants to leave. It's this weird ebb and flow of what love really is like, and how hard it can be to fall in love with somebody, and how that dynamic can work or not work at the same time. And this movie is very powerful. I highly recommend checking this movie out, because this movie is just it's one of the most emotional movies I've ever seen. And Hiroshima Mon Amour definitely deserves a spot as my favorite movie from 1959. I highly recommend this movie, and all the other movies I've talked about so far. Alright, so let's go to 1960. Alright, there's lots of things in 1960. These movies, let's just go with the Hollywood classics real quick. Another one, just like Ben-Hur, was Spartacus with Kirk Douglas, and this is directly by Stanley Kubrick. And so you probably know this movie. It's another kind of just big Hollywood movie. I really like this movie, and the ending is, the the thing that really matters the most in this movie, which I'll have you watch. But I'll just let you know I'm Spartacus. All right, so the next movie is a really fun movie with Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine in The Apartment. This movie is hilarious, and it's just this office, it's just a really crazy thing where pretty much all these office romances happen in this guy's apartment, and he's just getting used, and it's just really funny until he finds a person that he actually loves and wants to stay in his own apartment. It's a really funny movie. Another courtroom drama that I really liked was Inherent the Wind with Spencer Tracy. Every movie that's a courtroom drama has Spencer Tracy in it, it seems like. But another movie, kind of just like from Australia, it's got the Hollywood Gold series, just like my Moby Dick over here. But Inherent the Wind is really good about the Scopes monkey trial, and I really loved how compelling this is. It's definitely Hollywoodized, but it's important for social commentary, for sure. All right, next one is another big Hollywood film, that is with Yul Brynner. That's The Magnificent Seven. I really like this movie. I'm still not going to watch the new one. I don't know why they keep trying to remake all these movies, because the classics are much better than the new ones. But I really liked this this Western, and just like Seven Samurai, which is where it's got its idea from, it's just this town who pretty much has no money and sends need for help because these bandits are threatening them and their families and their lives. And these 7 people, with all different motives and different ways to be there, are there to help defend them, and for different reasons. And it just shows you that range of humanity. I really like that movie. And the last movie I actually saw that I just recently got, because Criterion finally put it out, is The Virgin Spring, which I really loved. Ingmar Bergman. This is a really good movie about this woman going to church, this virgin, this young daughter, who ends up being raped and murdered, and pretty much the father confronting all of that, and it's really strong. But the movie that I picked over that is the most iconic film from 1960, hands down, and also definitely one of the best movies. That's why I picked my spot. But I'm going to have to get into my little Hitchcock book, which, by the way, I have actually skipped a couple things from the 50s that I forgot to mention. One that I saw was Rear Window, which is a classic film. I also didn't pick The Trouble with Harry. I also didn't pick The Man Who Knew Too Much, nor did I pick Vertigo, but I did pick Psycho for 1960. Psycho is an iconic film. It's shot in black and white. It's shot in black and white on purpose. I mean, people talked about this movie to death. I mean, that shower scene is infamous. You know, just watch the film. You know about Psycho. I don't really have to talk about it too much. Psycho is amazing. It's a great Hitchcock film. I would say it's probably his best film. But that's just personally my opinion. There's some things that I like a little bit better. But, you know, I'd say objectively, Psycho is Hitchcock. All right, so from there, let's actually move on to our last year, 1961, which also has quite the few titles that I really liked that I did not pick. The first one with Gregory Peck and Robert Mitchum again was Cape Fear. The original Cape Fear was a really great film about Robert Mitchum being a crazy person again, just like Night and the Hunter. Just a crazy person coming back from jail to a prosecutor who is pretty much just tormenting this entire family. And it's insane. It's really crazy. Another film with Spencer Tracy, a courtroom drama, Judgment at Nuremberg. Very Hollywoodized statement on the effects that the Nazis did in Germany and elsewhere to the Jewish people. But this movie is very powerful nonetheless, even though it is Hollywoodized. I highly recommend checking it out. It's long, but it's lengthy. It's got some key elements to it that are really, really powerful. Probably the most iconic film on this list, one of them, is Breakfast at Tiffany's. You have Audrey Hepburn. This movie's it's fun. It's just pretty much this girl living in an apartment, and this guy who kind of clumsily falls in love with her, and just it's a fun movie. Except for you know, that whole Mickey Rourke thing, or Mickey Rooney. Goddamn. All right. So these last 2 films are the films that I actually had to pick between. The first one being Yojimbo, the Akira Kurosawa film about this Ronin who is just this wonderless samurai who pops into this town and pretty much plays both sides of this town who are just dueling between each other, and I really love this movie. This is the prototype for the Fistful of Dollars, which is the Eastwood movie, Clint Eastwood film. This is the original, and this is what is kind of that Eastwood-esque kind of spaghetti western start. That's what it reminds me of. But Yojimbo was not my pick. My pick was actually a much more terrifying film in The Innocence. And this movie, good God, this the performances by these children who are just ultra creepy, the cinematography, which is just so dark, and I didn't realize that a movie like this could scare me as much as this movie did. This movie is creepy as fuck, and I highly recommend checking out The Innocence. Jack Clayton did a fantastic job directing this movie, with these kids saying crazy things, and this woman pretty much going mad by having to take care of these kids and not realizing what's happening in the house and realizing what's happening around her. I highly recommend checking out The Innocence. Alright, so that was it. It's really hot, I'm sweating, you probably can see that, but from my 1951 to 1961 picks, those are my picks for the year. So I highly recommend checking out all those films, even the ones I just honorably mentioned. I am looking forward to checking out 1962 to 1972. That is our next trip on the journey until we get finally to 2018 in December. So 1962 to 1972, that's what I'm looking forward to. I want to hear your thoughts down below from your 1951 to 1961 picks. Was there anything I didn't watch that you think I should watch? Do you disagree with some of my picks? I want to hear your thoughts down below. Don't forget this video a like, comment down below, share, and also subscribe, because I'm not jonesing around.